bus caught up with me, and the bus driver got out and started shouting at me. He's like, you think because you're in a wheelchair I'm not going to hit you? And I just said to him, you think because I'm in a wheelchair I'm not going to hit you back? But all that day in work, I just sat there feeling wretched. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why do I do stuff like that? What, like I could have hurt somebody. I'm behaving like an idiot. I didn't like who I was becoming when I was so angry.
Welcome, Matt. Good to have you here. Can you let us know a bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm originally from Scotland. I was raised round about Edinburgh. I'm 57 years old. I'm currently living in Portugal with my 3 children, who are 23, 21 and 16. I've been here for 12 years. Originally came with my wife and children, and had a farm with alpacas and horses, donkeys, pigs, ducks, geese, chicken, just about everything you could think of. Animals really just became pets in the end. We were going to breed the alpacas and try and sell them in the international market, and various things happened and that never really took off, so I just ended up working here instead. From my previous life in Scotland, I was raised round about the Edinburgh area with my brother and my mum and dad. So lived there for quite a long time. About 5 years in Edinburgh, and then moved out to the suburbs. My mum was a believer. My dad was an atheist. My brother is still an atheist. They've never really had faith. And I remember as a child, my mum said to me, "Do you believe that there is a God?" And I said, "No, I don't think there is," which I didn't really. I wasn't 100% convinced either way, whether there was or wasn't, but I just kind of thought, maybe not. Dad doesn't believe and my brother doesn't think so. They had done a lot of stuff where they took us to museums and things, and I remember them taking us to the one with Darwin's museum, and it was just looking at all the different stuff on the wall about, like evolution. And even as a child, I remember thinking, I don't believe this, this doesn't sound practical or reasonable. How can, like an amoeba just suddenly split into itself and decide to become a frog, or, just various things like that. And I just didn't believe it. But it didn't make me think, well, there must be a God instead then. I just didn't really know what life was about. So I had an accident when I was 12 as well. I was playing on a building site, and the big triangular roof beams stacked on the ground. So I was stood inside them throwing nails at my friends, as you do. And I could feel them shaking like this, and I thought, well, I didn't feel comfortable to be there, so I decided I was going to make a run for it, and I felt them tip that way, so I ran that way, and then they tipped back and landed on my back. If I had been a slower runner, it could have been worse. It could have broken my neck or killed me. So I was fortunate that I was able to still be in a wheelchair and move with my arms and get good upper body strength. And I played a lot of wheelchair basketball. My parents got me involved in that at quite a young age, sort of a year after my accident, because it took about 3 months in hospital and an operation, because the accident, the wooden beams, they severed the spinal cord, shattered some vertebrae, so I needed an operation to put steel rods in my back, and that sort of like enabled me to sit upright, and it took a while to get used to the wheelchair. I used to practice doing wheelies in the hospital till I got good at it, but when I first had the chair, I remember there was a ramp from the physio department going back up to the hospital, and it was a very shallow ramp, but I used to be like, oh, this is hard work getting up here. But eventually, like after I'd been in the chair for a little while, it's like that ramp became so easy to push up, and I could feel and see my arms just getting bigger. I used to be in the hospital as well. There was 2 guys in from the army, and one had dived into the shallow end of a swimming pool drunk and broke his neck. I can't remember how the other one ended up in a wheelchair, but it's a very similar sort of thing. I think he was drunk and got injured. But they used to bring beer in and the guy would say to me, "I'll let you drink as much of my beer as you can in 10 seconds." And even at the age of 12, I was down in half a can of beer in 10 seconds. So he eventually got fed up with me, and he was like, "You can have, like, I'll count to 3 and then that's it." So like, I had a lot of time in hospital. I didn't particularly like it or enjoy it. You go through things with issues with your kidneys and things like that. But eventually I adapted to being in the chair. I didn't particularly like it at first, and I couldn't even understand how to turn it. I'm sitting there going, "How do you make it turn?" And someone had to say to me, "You hold one wheel and you push with the other." I was like, "Oh, okay." Because I could only ever see one guy in a wheelchair, and he used to fly around the hospital ward, and he would just hold onto a wall and it would turn the chair. I'm thinking, that's great, but if there's no wall there, how do you make it go? So when I came out of hospital, I did lose some of my friends, because it happened on a building site, and my parents were looking at a court case against the building company. So the parents of some of my friends said, "Don't have anything to do with it because we don't want you involved in that stuff." So they just stopped seeing me as friends. So I made other friends in the area. Used to have a guy who would stand on the back of my chair, fly down the hills, stuff like that. One day he did accidentally turn me into the curb and we both crashed. So like, I grew up in that area, had quite a few friends. As I got older, I went out drinking more, and I used to quite like drinking a bit too much, wheel down hills, drunk, smash into potholes, busted up my knee one time really badly. Had to go to hospital, got an injection to sort it all out and so on. But as I got older, I think I started to drink more, probably having too much alcohol at times. I quite regularly be at home, I'd be sick from drink, and sort of staggering about the place. Sometimes I'd even drive quite drunk. Shouldn't have been doing it, but I did. It's just some of the things I did. I probably got more involved in wheelchair sports. So I did wheelchair basketball, tennis. I was doing swimming. So the sports side of it I quite enjoyed. Went away on tours to Toronto. The team went to Japan, which I didn't do that one. Went to Houston and Texas as well for a tournament, and we won our division. Never actually won the whole league. So I used to do a lot of touring up and down the country with basketball. And then when I met my wife in Amsterdam, she wasn't my wife then, but as we met in Amsterdam, I sort of tailored off quite a lot of the stuff that I was doing. And sort of like just before I met my wife, one of my biggest issues I had probably was anger. And the problem I was having with anger was, like, I would get really angry and I would be quite rude and abusive to people. And after I'd been doing this for a while, I got to a point where I was like, why do I behave this way? I didn't like who I was becoming. And I had a particular incident when I was driving to work one day, and a bus cut in front. With like a 2-lane road, you'd come down, and the buses would always just sort of like, cars that was coming this way, doing the right thing, and the bus would just come right down the outside, stick his indicator on and shove its way in. It's happened so many times, I got fed up with it. And I think the bus driver realised I was annoyed at the fact he'd barged in. And so I was going to go, I'm going to overtake this bus no matter what, because I'm so annoyed at him. So I came to try and go around the outside, overtake, and he pushed the bus further and further out to stop me. So I decided, well, I'll go up the inside then. And I saw a gap it was like parked cars. There was a bit of a gap that I thought, I've got a chance I could go up the inside, pull back out in front of the bus, and I'm ahead of him. So that's what I did. But because I was angry, what I did was, as I pulled back in front of the bus, I slammed the brakes on in the car and stopped, and I could see him having to brake hard behind me. And he's sort of like, you could see all the people in the bus falling forward, and I just thought, man, that's crazy. I'm basically, if someone had been there with a newborn baby, They could have like lost control of the baby, could have got injured, anybody could have got hurt, old ladies could have been hurt, stopping that suddenly. And it was like I got into town, I parked my car and I got out and I was heading into work, and then the bus caught up with me and the bus driver got out and started shouting at me. He's like, you think because you're in a wheelchair I'm not going to hit you? And I just said to him, you think because I'm in a wheelchair I'm not going to hit you back? Because at the time I was doing so much sport. I think he'd looked down at me and could see the size of my arms and thought, maybe this isn't worth it, So he just got back in the bus and left, obviously not realising that he had anything to do with the blame of what went on. But anyway, regardless. All that day in work, I just sat there feeling wretched. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why do I do stuff like that? What, like I could have hurt somebody. I'm behaving like an idiot. I didn't like who I was becoming when I was so angry. So I was driving home. The idea of speaking to this God that I didn't even believe in, I don't even know why I did it, but I prayed and said, well, God, if you're real and I do something like that again, take my license off me. And I was like, carried on, went home, couldn't feel particularly better about myself that day. But over the following week, the feelings subside. You sort of go, okay, well, that was just then. Maybe I can get past it, So maybe about 10 days later, I did something stupid in the car. And the first thing that came in my head was, shall I take your license off you now? Now, I don't know if I was hearing the voice of God or if I was just something triggered in my mind, like a replay. And I thought, I don't want to lose my license. So I said, no, don't take my license off me. Please forgive me. I'm asking a God who I don't believe in to forgive me, which was the weirdest thing I think I've done, probably. But anyway, so the following week, I had Christians stop me and talk to me constantly. And I'm going like, well, what are all these Christians coming up to me for? Can they not annoy somebody else? And I very impolitely told them where to go, except for the end of the week, Friday, I was going into work. And I think it had been raining a bit, and the front step I had to go up, it was quite slippy, it was marble. And I'd tried and tried and tried. I couldn't get up this step. So guy was walking past and went, oh, excuse me, can you just help push my chair up this step? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And so he helps me up the step, and in an Australian accent he says, oh, can I have a quick word with you? And I was like, yeah, okay. I thought I'd be a lost tourist, just wanting some directions or something, because he was Australian. And he kneels down beside me as I got into the workplace, and he goes, I'm a Christian and I believe in that. I was like, oh, not again. This is getting ridiculous, So because he helped me and he'd been kind to me, I couldn't just tell him to get lost. So I thought, okay, I listened to him, and he gave me a phone number and said, look, we just get together, we're just friends, and, if you fancy coming down, you feel very welcome. And I sat in my bedroom that night thinking, well, should I phone this guy? He might be okay. What if they're a bunch of weirdos, So after all this toing and froing in my head, it's like they say, it's a bit like the devil on one side and the angel on the other shoulder, and you're having that conversation. So eventually I went, well, I can phone them and go and see them. And if they are weirdos, I don't have to go back. It's not a problem. So I went down and I spent time with them. And I think I could fairly say, yes, they were a bunch of weirdos, but something inside of me started to go like, well, maybe I could read about Jesus and have a bit more understanding, knowledge of what does the Bible say, even though all their message was, you have to live perfectly or you're going to burn in hell. So they basically used hell as a sort of fear. If you're not right with God, you'll go into hell, you're going to hell. And this was all they talked about constantly. And thankfully, I had a guy in my swimming club who was a Christian, born-again Christian, and they came to my swimming club. And so they cornered him one day and told him he was going to burn in hell. And he's like, no, I've given my life to Jesus. I know I'm not going to burn in hell. Like he saved me through his sacrifice on the cross. And he came up to me the following week when they weren't there and just said, so what are these guys telling you? So I went through what they were saying and I said, I'm not comfortable with it, because like, I was always told God was a God of love, but all I hear is hell and damnation, fury, wrath, and I said, so I don't understand, where is the love? How do I get to this love part? And he said, well, I think you should speak to my minister. And I did, and the minister just very quickly just opened up and said, well, if you died tonight and you stood before God and he said, well, why should I let you into my kingdom? What would you say? And I said, well, I've tried to be a good person, but I know I've failed a lot of the time. And he said, no. He said, you just basically say, I know that your son died on the cross for me. He set me free from sin and shame and death and guilt and all those things. And I thought, oh, okay, it's as simple as that. And he's like, yes. So I was like, wow, that's a much nicer sounding gospel than the death and hell one, So I started going to that church and started to learn about God, and I was reading the Bible and starting to understand the things that Jesus spoke about. There was a lot of stuff I didn't understand, which over time I've started to learn more. But going to that church I found really good. It was like an Anglican church. They were quite straight in many ways. And so there wasn't quite so much freedom in the spirit as I think I experience at the moment. So it was quite rigid, and there was a lot of like, this is the structure of worship, this is the structure of teaching, so there was a lot of structures in place, which, at the time was okay because I didn't know anything different. So I didn't feel the need to sort of have any change or move on. But the group I was part of, they did try to get me to go back to them. And the guy that had originally helped me into work stood by my car one day and said, you need to come back. And I said, but I just don't feel it's right for me anymore. And he said, well, you don't tell God what to do. He tells you what to do. And I said, yeah, the problem is you're not God. And I just got in the car and left. And thankfully they did stop harassing me and phoning me and waiting by my car. So like I started to go to what they called house groups or cell groups at the time. And I was learning from more mature Christians and starting to understand. But one of the things I started to see in the body of Christ was this, what they call the prophetic. So it's like when someone would speak over somebody, where they're basically saying, like, I hear God saying this over you, or I see this about you, and God saying this about your life, and this is something for your future, or this is something for now, or and they would start to explain things over people's lives that was coming from the heart of God. And I thought, wow, that's amazing to be able to speak that, and I thought, I want this for myself, and I just kept going to God, going, I really like that prophetic. Can you give that to me? Can you make me do that? And I pestered and pestered and pestered. And I think after about 3 months, we were in the cell group and they were talking about the prophetic. And I had this picture of a hamster nibbling at the edge of a biscuit. And I was just like, what am I supposed to do with that? So I just spoke it out. So I don't understand why I'm seeing this, but that's what I see. And one of the leaders at the time, he said, well, what I see is it's like, this is us just coming on the very edge of the prophetic and starting to understand it. But I now understand what God was saying to me is, no, this is you are now starting on your prophetic journey. It's like you've got like this, like a biscuit would look quite big to a hamster, I guess, and I reckon what he's saying is there's so much more to explore in the prophetic. But yes, I'm going to start to do that in your life. And it started to come then, I would get pictures and see things for people. And like sometimes God would just show me a picture and I wouldn't know who it was for. But so I remember one time we were in a group meeting and he just showed me a red heart with a black hand going round this heart and squeezing it, like trying to squeeze the life out of it. So I just said, well, who's that for? And he was like, just share it. So I was like, okay. So I just shared it in the group. And one of the ladies there had been having marital problems and her husband had been quite violent towards her. And she said, that's for me, and so we were able to pray and change things for her through prayer. Like the marriage kind of did end, but it ended in a better way. He sort of left, and there was no more violence in the house, so things worked out much better. And so I feel like he's progressed me with the prophetic. I feel he shows me things in people where I can sort of like pray them over those people and release things into those people's lives because of what he says and what he shows me. And it's just been really good. And he's, like probably about 3 or 4 years ago, he did show me, I'd had a period where I'd had an infection in my eye and I nearly lost the sight in it. And I had to rest for about a 2 or 3 week period. And I spent a lot of time just at home, and I was watching a lot of things on YouTube about like God and, just lots of different things. But as I was spending time with him, like I just felt like I was drawing deeper into him. And eventually I got better. My eyesight sort of improved, and it's not 100%, but a lot better. So I went back to church, and this particular Sunday, it was just a normal Sunday. It was like the worship, teaching, communion, nothing out of the ordinary. And right at the end, he just showed me this vision. It was like, and I was on a white horse, and I could physically feel the strength of the legs of this horse. Like I've got no sensation in my legs. I can't move my legs at all. But I felt the power go through my legs. It was almost like I could have got up and run. That's how much power I felt going through them, but I still physically couldn't feel them. But I was able to, in the spirit, I was on this horse and I was racing around this like what looked like another world. I didn't really know where it was. And as I was sort of like on this horse, I suddenly came to the place where Jesus was, and I could see him, and he just sort of smiled at me. But I was so excited about this horse, I rode off up it, and I actually went up into the sky. And I just remember thinking, this is crazy, but it just felt so natural. It felt like this is like real life. This is what life is about, And since then, I've had a lot more experiences where I go into these kind of heavenly realms and I see things. Like it, just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he showed me, like we were up on this, like a rocky ledge, and I'm looking up into the sky, and he's going, I love this constellation. And he showed me this constellation of stars. And he said, and it looked like, it was like a waterfall of stars. He said, there's light inside that refracts, it's constantly moving, and it gives that waterfall effect. And I just remember thinking, man, it's amazing the things that he can show us that are not here on the earth. And he can take us to places that we can only see in the spirit realm. But it's like my walk with him has just increased and grown. And I feel like I just really want so much more. It's like, I think what we see now and what we're starting to see, the heavens are opening up more and more for people to go in and see. This isn't like about, I've got to be dead before I go to heaven. It's like, there's even that scripture says, some of you will not die before you see the kingdom of heaven. And that means that we can go in and be part of it and see it in the here and now. You don't have to be dead and go up and see it. So when we die to ourselves and we're born again, that's when we can go and see the kingdom of heaven. And that's my desire for every person, that they see something of Jesus while they're here on the earth and understand the goodness of God and the amazing love that he has for each one of us.
Thank you, Matt. For anyone that might be watching and maybe they're struggling with anger or rage, do you have any words of encouragement that you can share with them?
Yeah, first of all, don't beat yourself up about being angry, because the rage isn't necessarily coming from you. Sometimes things happen in our life where, like anger can come in. It's like anger is really a demonic kind of thing. It's not something that comes from God necessarily, although you can have a a righteous anger in the Lord. But generally speaking, most people, when they're angry, they just and they're swearing and shouting and, aggressive. So when you feel that coming upon you, it's like the only way I can sort of deal with it now is I have to sort of step back almost, remind myself that that's not who I am. That's not, like, my emotions are not who I am. And I just have to sort of say, Jesus, just, can you help me at this point? And it's not always easy to do that, because sometimes, you've got that red rag and you're just seeing the rage inside. But I would encourage you to bring it to the Lord, because I know if I hadn't met Jesus all those years ago, my anger would be much worse. I might have even been to the point where I injured somebody or really hurt somebody. I remember even as a child, I had a fight with a young boy, and I picked him up and I was spinning him round, and I was actually going to throw him into a wall because he was a lot smaller than I was. And as soon as I did that, I saw in my head what could happen, and I immediately was like, whoa, and I put him down and just had to go away. But that's the problem with anger, is like, unless you can see the effects of your rage, sometimes you just carry on and you just do it today, you'll do it tomorrow, you'll just not stop. But Jesus has helped me with mine. I know that. And I would encourage you to just come and place it before him, take it to the cross, because when you put it on the cross, he deals with it. He's the one that encourages you. He's the one that will lift you up and take you out of that place of anger.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's very valuable. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Okay, you're welcome.